Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started with this next topic. This is titled Practicing in a World of the Unknowing, Relationships with Non-Practitioners. What I'm referring to here is individuals who aren't practicing the teachings of the Buddha. This can oftentimes be a real struggle because, like we were just talking about with true love, if you're practicing true love, love without attachment, but maybe you have a life partner or a friend who's not, and maybe they go on a business trip and they're like, hey, did you miss me? And you're like, nope, didn't miss you. They're like, huh? They're really confused because in their mind, missing somebody means love. And if you didn't miss me, it means that you don't love me. So you're going to find that as you're learning and practicing these teachings more and more, that as you interact with other people, their mind's going to be thinking in one way and your mind's going to be thinking a completely different way because you have a different perspective. So oftentimes it can be a real struggle in these kinds of relationships. So I'm going to give you some guidance on how to, kind of work in these relationships and build more harmony, because one of the things that the Buddha is teaching you, among all the other things that he's teaching you, is how to live harmoniously with all beings, not just enlightened beings, because it's easy to be harmonious with an enlightened being, because an enlightened being is not going to be angry or want you to do anything. Oh, it's going to be so wonderful being around enlightened people. But when you're around unenlightened people, that's where you're going to really struggle with your mind being unenlightened and they're unenlightened. But the more enlightened that you become, you'll be able to live harmoniously with all these beings. So first, let's just talk about what a non-practitioner is. This is someone who is not actively learning and practicing the path to enlightenment as taught by the Buddha. The Buddha refers to this person as an untrained worldling. When you look in his teachings, he refers to them as an untrained worldling because they're untrained, meaning that their mind lacks wisdom, and worldling, meaning that they're holding on to the world, right? They're wanting the world to be a certain way, and they're wanting you to be a certain way. So that's why he calls them an untrained worldling. And I would just say a non-practitioner, right? So it's important to not develop this attitude of us versus them. Sometimes when topics like this are being discussed and we're kind of in an environment where all of us are learning and practicing the teachings, it's like, oh, it's us versus them. It's really important not to adopt that mentality because all of us are the same. All of us are equal. It's just that different people have different wisdom in their mind, right? So other people are going to be thinking of things in one way. You're going to be thinking of things in another way. So it's important not to develop this us versus them mentality. A non-practitioner is going to think about the world very differently, and they're not going to understand the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths is where you understand the problem in the unenlightened mind, the cause of the problem, the elimination, the path forward. So the problem in the mind is discontentedness, the conditional feelings, the mind going up and down and up and down and up and down. The cause of that problem is craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning. What's going on in your own mind, that's what's causing the mind to go up and down and up and down. The elimination of that is to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. And the way to eliminate that, the path forward, is the Eightfold Path. So while you may be establishing right view where you understand your feelings are being caused by your own mind, a non-practitioner isn't going to understand that. They're oftentimes going to be blaming you. So your parents, your siblings, your life partner, your children, people around you may be blaming you for their feelings. And you know with 100% certainty that you're not causing their feelings. But they don't understand that. And you can't sit down and explain it to them. You can't sit down at a bus stop or at a dinner table or something like this and explain to mom the Four Noble Truths in a way that she's going to get it necessarily. So you're going to be interacting with non-practitioners who firmly believe that you are causing them to be angry, and they're going to be trying to change you, and they're going to try to put their expectations on you and try to force you or convince you to do things their way, and they just don't understand that it's their own craving that is doing that. So because they don't understand craving, desire, attachment, they're going to be constantly struggling over and over and over again. They're going to be constantly struggling with problem after problem after problem after problem. They will most likely have wrong view and blame you for their discontentedness. They're most likely not going to understand true love, love without attachment. They're not going to understand how to do that. They're going to be wanting to put their expectations on you. And they think that those painful feelings that they have, they think the way to solve those painful feelings is to get you to do things a certain way. And they're going to be wanting to put expectations on you, not realizing that that's not going to solve their problems. Because if your parents have a certain expectation of you, and if you work and 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 get to that expectation, they're going to be happy for a period of time, maybe like a week or two, right? And then their expectations are going to change, and now they're going to want more and 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 more. And now you work to get that, and then okay, they're happy for a period of time, and then they're going to change again, right? So you meeting your parents' expectations is just being stuck in this constant cycle of you chasing after their expectations, and their expectations keep changing, and you're going to be struggling. You're going to be carrying this burden of meeting your parents' expectations, and you got to get rid of all of that. You got to realize that your goal in life is not to meet your parents' expectations. The problem that your parents are experiencing is their expectations. It's not you, but they're going to perceive it as you are the problem, and they are going to try to fix you. Same thing with your brothers and sisters and life partners. Anybody who's a non-practitioner that doesn't understand right view, they're going to think that their painful feelings is because of you, and they're going to want to try to control you and force you to do things their way. And this is just going to cause problems. So that's what I'm going to help you to understand. They may not actively be cultivating wholesome qualities of mind and actively eliminating unwholesome qualities. So while they get angry, they might be bitter, harsh, and hostile. They might yell at you, right? Because of their lack of wisdom, because of their lack of mental discipline, because of their unknowing of true reality. They think if they're yelling and hollering at you, that they're going to try to convince you to do things their way, right? And they're not cultivating wholesome qualities to practice things like right speech. And they're still holding on to those unwholesome qualities, because the unenlightened mind as a human being functions very much like an animal. What an animal does when an animal doesn't get what it wants is it shows its teeth, it growls, and it roars, and it tries to scare this other animal. This lion is going to try to scare this other lion to do things its way. And that's how a lion gets done what it wants to get done. In the human state, the unenlightened mind functions very much like an animal. When mom and dad don't get what they want, they'll yell, perhaps. They'll holler, right? They'll show their teeth very much like an animal, trying to force you or control you or scare you into doing things their way. And this is just because the human mind in the unenlightened state lacks wisdom. So part of what this path that you're doing is you're becoming a better and better human being. And not everybody's on that path. Not everybody's cultivating wholesome qualities. Not everybody's eliminating unwholesome qualities. So this is what a non-practitioner is. Someone who's not practicing the teachings, someone who doesn't have right view, that they think everyone else is causing their feelings. They're not interested in cultivating wholesome qualities or eliminating unwholesome qualities. They don't understand true love and some of these other things that you will understand if you gradually are learning these teachings. So this is the type of person that you might interact with at some time. 1 second, there we go. Okay. So in order to get to, hold on. Okay, this is more about a non-practitioner. So knowing the teachings and observing non-practitioners struggle, but yet they are uninterested to learn and practice the teachings. So this is one of the things that you might encounter, that you know the teachings and you know that this other person is struggling, right? But they don't know that they're struggling. And now you're stuck in the situation where you're observing this non-practitioner struggling and they're uninterested to learn. And you might have a certain attachment where you're craving for them to be a certain way. Like say, for example, you're learning about the Four Noble Truths. You're learning about craving, desire, attachment. You're learning about true love. And you know that these teachings are true. And you see your parents or your siblings or somebody else struggling in the world. You might really want them to learn and practice these teachings, but they're just not interested. And they're just not interested in learning more, but yet they keep struggling over and over and over and over and over and over again. So you might find that you have painful feelings when you see your parents struggling, or you see your brothers and sisters struggling. And what I'm sharing here is that you're going to need to eliminate any craving, desire, attachment that might exist, that everybody has to be practicing the teachings. You're going to need to eliminate that craving. Now, in terms of a life partner, I encourage you to have a life partner that is interested in practicing the teachings, because that's going to create the best environment for you and them to be successful. And that might take you some time. If you're going to decide to have a life partner, it might take you some time to find that person. If you're not interested in a life partner, fine, don't have a life partner. Live a single life, have lots of friends, and do whatever you're going to do, right? But if you're going to have a life partner, If you're practicing these teachings and they're not, you guys are going to be walking in completely opposite directions, and you will constantly struggle in life. But in terms of everybody else, like your parents, your brothers, your sisters, you don't need them to be practicing the teachings in order to have a healthy relationship with each other. But in terms of a life partner, to have a great life together, you guys are going to both need to be practicing the teachings if that's what you're going to end up doing, is having a life partner. So if you have a craving to help people and wanting mom to be a certain way or dad, you're going to need to eliminate that. That's what I'm sharing here in the first one. Non-practitioners' unwholesome moral conduct, like their wrong speech and wrong actions, you're going to notice that you're learning about right speech and right action and these other things, and you're going to see that other people aren't practicing them, and it might really hurt that you're speaking gentle, you're speaking warm, you're trying to be respectful and friendly and kind, but yet your parents are being hostile and bitter and aggressive. So you're going to need to eliminate any kind of craving for other people to practice moral conduct. So for example, you guys heard me share this yesterday, that when I was making the transformation on this path, my mom and I previously, we would both be bitter and hostile and harsh with each other. She would yell at me, I would yell at her, we would have all kinds of problems. But then slowly but surely, as I was transforming my mind, I had transformed my mind, but my mom hadn't. She wasn't doing this work. So when I'd be on the phone with her, sometimes she would be bitter and harsh and hostile with me. And I would need to say, Mom, I know in the past I've been bitter and harsh and hostile with you, but I'm choosing not to do that anymore. I'm going to get off the phone and let you think about what it is that you just said, and we'll talk another time. I love you, Mom. Be well. Bye-bye. Right? And I would get off the phone. So I didn't have a craving for my mom to be a certain way, and I didn't react negatively towards her, where in the past I would have, because I had a craving for my mom to be a certain way. But instead, I started responding in the situation rather than reacting. So you're going to need to respond, and sometimes your response needs to be just walk away. Sometimes that's all you can do because your own mind is becoming frustrated and angry. But as you gain more control over your mind, you won't need to do that necessarily because you'll have more control over your mind. You can respond. But early on, sometimes it's better to just walk away. Preserve your contentedness, preserve your calmness, and just walk away from the conversation. It's better to be quietly frustrated rather than overtly angry and hostile and bitter. If you're overtly angry, hostile, and bitter with people, you're putting out anger and hostility through your intentions, your speech, and actions, and that's all going to come back to you. But if you're just quietly frustrated, you'll just deal with that internally, and you're the only one that's having to deal with that. But when you put it out to other people, it's going to come back to you. So you're going to be quietly frustrated perhaps for a period of time where normally you would stand there and argue and yell with mom and dad. Now you choose to do something different. You walk away and you're quietly frustrated, but at least you're not being overtly angry and hostile and bitter, because that's what's going to come back to you. But if you're just quietly frustrated, okay, just deal with it on your own, and more your mind will get more calm and more peaceful. But if you're bitter and harsh and hostile overtly, it's just going to come back to you. Okay, so it's better to be quietly frustrated than overtly hostile and angry. You can choose to move on from relationships while maintaining loving kindness and compassion for all beings, understanding that any discontentedness you experience is from your own craving, desire, attachments. So I would like to share this with you, that there's something called aversion, that when you're angry, when you're hostile and you're bitter, if you're that way because of your own cravings, desires, attachments, you're wanting this person to be a certain way. But in the unenlightened state, we don't understand that. We think that the anger and the painful feelings is coming from mom, or the painful feelings are coming from dad. So what we will tend to do is we will push this person away. We will push a life partner away. We will push our children away. We will push friends away. This is called aversion. And the mind thinks that this is going to solve the problem, because the mind falsely understands what the problem is. It thinks the problem's external, so if we push it away, the mind thinks that that's going to solve the problem. But it doesn't, because you just get angry or irritated or annoyed about something else. It's just a matter of time. So in this situation, this is very unwise, because the person's mind is having what we call wrong view. The wrong view is, I think that the problem is mom, so I'm going to push mom away, and that's going to solve the problem, and now I'm going to go forward in life. Or I'm going to push my life partner away, and now I'm going to go forward in life, and that solved the problem. But this is unwise. This is based in the mind's ignorance or unknowing of true reality. So it's called aversion, where you're pushing a person or a situation away. Well, in some situations, certain relationships that you're in, it might be wise to move on from the relationship. Like I was sharing with you, it might be wise to move on from the relationship. Well, you can move on from a relationship while maintaining right view. That's what I'm sharing here, is that you can maintain right view, which is any painful feelings you're experiencing is coming from your own mind, but staying in the relationship is not going to be helpful for you to eliminate your craving, desire, attachment. It might mean you need to move on from the relationship. So from the outside looking in, it's the same thing, that you're walking away from a relationship. And it just looks like the same thing. But one way you're doing it is unwise. The other way you can do it would be wise. The unwise way would be to push this person away, thinking that that solves the problem, thinking that they are the ones who are causing your problem. That would be unwise. The wise way to do this is to realize any painful feelings you're experiencing is coming from your own mind, and moving on from the relationship might be what you need in order to get some distance and help your mind to let go of your attachment. And now once you've let go of your attachment, if you choose to get involved in the relationship again, that's your choice. But at that point, you'll do it with non-attachment. But it oftentimes takes 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years for you to let go of your attachment before it might be time to get back into the relationship if that's what you're choosing to do. So on this path to enlightenment, there's certain relationships that you have right now that you'll let go of and you'll move on from, and you'll never look back, that you'll just move on. And it just makes sense to do that because there's too much bitterness on their side and too much bitterness on your side, too much attachment. It's better to just let go and move on. That's one type of relationship. There's other type of relationships that you have right now that are maybe problematic and that are challenging, but you're more committed to those relationships and you're willing to do the work and they're going to do some work and you guys will sort this out and things will improve. But then there's a third category of relationships that as you learn and practice these teachings and you gain wisdom, you'll get to the point where you'll make these new relationships. You'll only ever be loving and kind in those relationships, and that's all that will ever come back to you. So these are the three categories of relationships. Some you're going to need to let go of and just walk away from, but maintain your right view and realize that any painful feelings you're experiencing is because of your own mind, and you can still love that person that you walked away from, which means you have a genuine interest in seeing them be well. And part of them being well means that maybe you need to end this relationship and move on. And then the second category is that in committed relationships, maybe your parents, your siblings, a life partner, you're going to sort that out. You're going to work that out. You might need to put the relationship on pause for a period of time. I did this with my mom many times and my sister, where I would pause the relationship, walk away, do some work on my own mind, and then kind of come back into the relationship. This can be very helpful for you, and it can be very helpful for them. And then the third category are relationships that are brand new. You haven't even met those people yet. You don't even know their names. You haven't even seen them yet. They're brand new people you're going to meet from this point forward in your life, and you'll only ever be loving and kind and warm and gentle in those relationships, and that's all that will ever come back to you. You'll get better and better at making wise decisions in these relationships, and you'll be able to make wiser and wiser decisions of who to involve in your life. So you can choose to move on from a relationship while maintaining right view and maintaining your loving kindness for that person. So I've had, of course, ex-girlfriends in the past. I love every single one of them. I never stopped loving them. But love means a genuine interest in seeing them be well. In each one of those relationships, I learned something, and I'm very appreciative for those relationships. Even my ex-wife, we decided ultimately that we couldn't live together, and we decided not to be in a relationship together, but I still love her, meaning I would like to see her be well. Right? I don't wish any harm on her, right? Her and I weren't right for each other. So I went and found another partner, and I think she's gone and found another partner too. And she's more happy with her choice, and I'm more happy with my choice. So we both got something better that we were looking for. But for us, at that point in our life, it just didn't work out, right? So there's no need for me to hate her or be vindictive or angry towards her. That doesn't help anything. Just recognizing that, hey, it didn't work out for us. Let it go and move on and find a different relationship. So you can maintain your love while choosing to walk away from a relationship. But make sure you maintain your right view that any painful feelings that you're experiencing because of the experiences that you're having in the relationship is because of your own mind. It's not the other person. You can eliminate craving, desire, wants, expectations that all beings need to learn and practice these teachings, ensuring that you're not forcing someone to get to enlightenment. You can't force someone to get to enlightenment. So as I was making this transformation in my life, I could see that my wife was having difficulties. I could see that my son was having difficulties. I was interested in teaching them and guiding them, but I needed to do that in a way that I wasn't forcing them and I wasn't controlling them. So you get really skillful about how to help the people around you. As you become more wise about these teachings, there's skillful ways to help other people without forcing them or without controlling them. So that's what I needed to do with my son, and that's what I needed to do with my wife. My son was readily learning with me. You know, he was interested in learning with me, and he asked me to teach him. But even still, in some cases, I needed to be skillful and kind of help him. But in my wife's situation, she wasn't interested. She had no interest in learning with me whatsoever. She was learning with somebody else, but she had no interest in learning with me. So I needed to skillfully kind of go around her ego and kind of help her. So in some cases, we'd be driving down the street. She'd be driving. I'd be in the passenger seat. My son would be in the back. And I would be teaching my son something. And she was hearing it and she was learning, but she wasn't learning from me. I was teaching my son. Or sometimes she would be in the living room and she would just be sitting there doing something. And I know that I had taught a certain class online and I'd recorded it for a podcast and I needed to edit the podcast. So I would come downstairs and I would sit in the living room where she was at and I would edit the podcast because she would hear it because I didn't use headphones. I would do it without headphones. So she would hear me teaching while she was sitting in the living room. But it was just me editing a podcast. I didn't force her to listen to it. She's the one who chose to sit there in the living room and she heard it. And she would sit there and she would listen to it while I was editing it, right? So there's little skillful things you can do like this where I wasn't forcing her, I wasn't controlling her. I was just coming down into the living room to edit a podcast. If she chose to stay there and listen, that was her choice, right? And now she got to learn, right? So slowly but surely, the family started learning in these skillful ways. So you might find ways like this to be skillful with the people around you, okay? Some other things is train the mind to be comfortable with accepting other people's choices and decisions, and that their decisions are not going to match your decisions and your wants and your expectations. What you decide in your life is going to be different than what others choose, right? Be sure you're not craving permanence. You're not going to agree with anybody's decisions 100% of the time. I don't agree with my son's decisions 100% of the time, and he's probably the person in the world that's the closest to my personality, but he still makes decisions different than me. Like right now, I don't know if you guys noticed, he's growing his hair out. I think he should cut his hair. I think he should have a nicer haircut than what he's got now. But that's his choice. That's what he's choosing to do. He's choosing to let his hair grow out. And I've even suggested to him that he at least goes and gets a trim because it's like fraying on the ends. He's like, no, Dad, this is what I would like to do. I'd like to see how long it can grow. I'm like, all right, well, if that's what you'd like to do, go ahead and do it, right? That's his choice. But in all of the world, there's not anybody that you're going to agree with 100% of the time. But if there was somebody that there was a chance for me to potentially agree with 100% of the time, it would be my son because his personality is so similar to mine. But even him, I don't agree with him 100% of the time. And he doesn't agree with me 100% of the time too, right? So you're going to not agree with anybody 100% of the time. So if your ability to be in a relationship with someone is contingent on they have to agree with you 100% of the time and you have to agree with them 100% of the time, you're only ever going to hang out with one person, and that's yourself, right? Because that's the only person you're ever going to agree with. So you're going to be in situations where you disagree with people, and that doesn't mean you have to speak up and say something. I was at a lunch just recently where there was a student talking to another student, and this person was talking disparagingly about Gotama Buddha, and they were gossiping and slandering Gotama Buddha. And I was at a table where we were eating food. That person was talking to another student. They weren't talking to me. And even though I knew what they were saying was unwise, and even though I knew it wasn't correct, that Gotama Buddha never said what that it is that they had said, I didn't even say anything. It wasn't my place. They didn't ask me. That was their conversation between that student and the other student. It wasn't my place to step in and correct that, right? If those students would have said to me, hey, David, is this what the Buddha said? I would have said, no, absolutely not. He didn't say that at all. But in that situation, I can still love that student, even though they were gossiping and slandering somebody that I admire and I respect and I have enormous amount of gratitude for. I can still love that student. I can have a genuine interest in seeing them be well. their perspective and their opinion and what they have understood, and my opinion is unwise and it's not correct, it's not accurate, but they didn't ask for my opinion in that particular situation, so I didn't share it. I didn't need to share it, right? But if they would have asked me, I would have shared it. So you're going to be in situations where people might be disparaging somebody that you really admire. And in that situation, hey, that's their opinion, that's their view, that's their gossip, that's their slander. You don't have to allow it to affect your mind. You can maintain your contentedness and your joy, even though things around you that you might disagree with, because this is just impermanence. But if you have a craving for everyone to be a certain way, you won't be able to maintain your contentedness. So the problem is not that others aren't practicing the teachings, but instead that your mind might crave or want or long for people to practice the teachings. So you might see that if you really want mom or dad or brothers and sisters to be practicing the teachings, or a boyfriend or somebody like this, if you really want it really badly, you'll be frustrated. The problem isn't that they're not practicing the teachings. That's a problem for them that they're not practicing the teachings. But the problem that you're experiencing, if you're frustrated when you're around these people, that you want them to practice the teachings, the problem you're experiencing is you're expecting them to practice the teachings. Understand that you can disagree with others' intentions, speech, and actions while choosing to remain peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. As I was mentioning as we were breaking up there towards the end of the last class, that even if somebody murdered my son, I could still love the murderer. I don't agree with what he said or what he did or she did to murder my son, but I can still love the person. Loving a person means that you have a genuine interest in seeing them be well. It doesn't mean you agree with everything that they do. Sometimes we think that love is that this person does everything I want them to do, right? So to practice with non-practitioners, you're going to be around plenty of people that you disagree with. You disagree with their intentions, their speech, and their actions. You wouldn't choose to do that, but other people are. And that's okay. Right? Like in this situation where this student was disparaging Gautama Buddha and they were slandering him and gossiping him, I disagreed with what that person was doing, but it wasn't affecting me. That was the person that was choosing to gossip and slander, and that's affecting them. It's not affecting me, right? Because my mind doesn't have a craving for everybody to think of Gautama Buddha in the same way that I do. Right? I think of Gautama Buddha with a high degree of admiration and respect and gratitude, but not everybody thinks that way, and that's okay, right? It's just a different perspective and different experiences. Understand that you can disagree with people, and not only their intentions, speech, and actions, but you can still maintain your loving kindness and compassion for them. Loving kindness is a genuine interest in seeing them be well. Compassion is concern for their misfortune. So in this situation with the student who was disparaging Gautama Buddha, I had a genuine interest in seeing him be well, and I had concern for his misfortune. It's so unfortunate that he felt like he needed to slander and gossip about Gautama Buddha, this amazing person who I know did amazing things in the world. It's so unfortunate that he felt like he had to diminish Gautama Buddha, because there's no benefit to that. And the person that he was talking to probably saw through that as well. I'm not sure, right? So this person was harming themselves by disparaging other people, even if it wasn't Gautama Buddha, even if it was just a 5-year-old child standing on the street and this person was gossiping and slandering about that person. It's harming them. So I had concern for their misfortune, but I didn't feel like I needed to step in and change anything because the person didn't ask me for any help in that situation. So here at the end of this little talk, this is just a short little talk. What I usually do is I just open up to any discussion that you guys might be interested to have. Maybe there's certain struggles or certain challenges that you're having in your relationships where maybe you would like to ask questions about those. So you can ask them here at the temple by using a microphone. Online, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand electronically, because here I'm just kind of sharing with you kind of some general teachings, but now the way to really bring it into your life is to share some details about any struggles that you're encountering, and then I can help you understand how to approach that. So it looks like, Rex, you have a question?
Yes. Hello? Yeah. Just to grab onto that very last thing in your lecture before we go open discussion.
The batteries went out. Some impermanence. it came back on.
Yeah, I just don't quite, I can't get my head around, if you know someone is doing something bad for themselves, out of loving kindness, you don't feel obligated to step in or to help them, or your example was just, pretty innocent. I mean, it wasn't going to change their lives necessarily. But if someone is saying something wrong that you know is wrong, that ultimately is incorrect, and then you extrapolate that to someone maybe hurting themselves or something like that, you don't feel the need out of loving kindness to prevent either ignorance or hurt to them?
It depends on my role in their life, right? In this particular situation, it was a person who had been learning with me a little bit, and I knew that this person had an enormous ego, and me stepping in wouldn't have helped because their ego was so high that it would just be going up against an ego. So I chose not to step in. In some situations, if somebody, even if it was a student, I might say something like, are you interested in a different opinion on that? Or are you interested in my thoughts on that? And then if they say no, say, okay, and I'm fine with that, right? But if they say yes, then I would share it with them. Because when you're sharing unsolicited information, unsolicited guidance, this is coming from your own ego, saying that I know what's right, this person is wrong, and now I need to step in and tell that person what to do. Right? Because if you were sitting down at a restaurant, for example, and somebody just came up to you and started sharing something like, hey, the way you're talking to your wife is not correct. You should be doing it this way. You'd be like, whoa, dude, like, who are you? Like, who are you? I don't even know you, right? Because this person doesn't have a role in in your life. Who are they to judge you whether or not you're talking to your wife wisely or not? It's really unwise to go give someone unsolicited guidance. But in certain situations, certain roles, like if it was my son,
exactly,
I'm going to share with him. Or if it's my wife, because that's my role. But even still in those situations, you'll sometimes hear me say to my son, like if you were at home with us, sometimes I'll see him doing something and I'll say, hey, Bailan, are you interested in Dad's thoughts on how to maybe do that better? And most of the time he says yes, but there's been occasions where he says no. And that particular thing that he's doing isn't unwise enough for me to say, I've got to teach him this. Absolutely. In some situations, it's just a little bit unwise. And he says he's not interested in my input, and I just let him do it so he can see how unwise it is. And then he can learn from his own karma. So you got to look at your role. And then when you look at your role, you still got to sometimes say, are you interested in my advice? Are you interested in my thoughts? Would you like my perspective on that? And sometimes they're going to say yes, and sometimes they're going to say no. And if you don't have a craving to help this person, you should be fine either way, whether they say yes or they say no.
But your action doesn't have to be, you can take unsolicited action. For example, you mentioned if your son runs out in the street, you're going to grab him. You're not going to you're not going to ask him,
right,
is that a wise thing to do or not? You're just going to take action.
Right.
So again, with your son, if he says something that you know is absolutely wrong and would ultimately be the wrong way of looking at things or the wrong way of acting or the wrong way of doing things, you're not going to solicit, hey, would you like to know? Sometimes you're just going to give unsolicited advice, I presume. I'm just asking the question.
In my son's case, yes, because the role that I play in his life is very different, right? Like if he said something that was very unwise or his perspective on something was very unwise, I need to guide him to become a better and better person. And he's even shared as early as 8 years old that he said to me, he said, Dad, I would like to be a teacher the same way as you. I would like to share the teachings of the Buddha someday. So, okay. And I said, well, if that's the case, then you're going to need to learn a lot from Dad. And he's like, yeah, I would like you to teach me. So we have this relationship where he knows that anytime he's thinking a certain way or he says a certain thing, Dad will step in and teach him the Buddhist teachings about that particular thing. But if it was you, I wouldn't necessarily just step in and say something to you, even though you're a student, even though you've been actively learning for a while now, for a month or so. I wouldn't just step into your life and start telling you what you should and shouldn't do. Like if I saw a student's Facebook post that I look at, I'm like, wow, that's unwise. They really shouldn't be saying that. That's super unwise. I'm not going to just say, hey, by the way, you learned this in class. You're not supposed to be talking this way. This is going to cause you harm. That's not my role. That's not my place. My role as a teacher is that I will share teachings when a student requests it. Because if I give teachings in an unsolicited way, it's like inserting myself into that person's life when they haven't asked for my help. And it would be one's own ego that would choose to do that. But my son is very different. So that's why I say this all starts with, you got to know your role in somebody's life.
What is your responsibility to strangers? What if you either saw something on the street where people were going to do harm to themselves or to others, or what if someone just out of the blue sent you a message, David, I'm so distraught, I'm going to kill myself. What is the role? What is a person's role to someone they may not even know? Yeah,
this actually just happened this morning. I was at the vegetarian restaurant that we always go to, and this gentleman parked his motorbike on the side of the street that I know he's not supposed to park it there. And he parked there, and I was sitting right there and saw him do it, and I just didn't say anything to him. And then he came in, he got his food, and then when I was finishing up and I was leaving, the police came over, they saw his motorbike, and they were like looking in the restaurant for him. And I knew who it was that parked there, and I walked over to him and I said, sir, the police officer would like you to move your motorbike. And he's like, oh, thank you so much. And he goes out there, and then he starts talking to the police officer, and the police officer asked him for his driver's license and some other things like this. And I overheard it. And this was a person who was not Thai. So I overheard what the police officer was saying. And the police officer said, it's normally 2,000 baht, but it's only 500 for you. And I already know because I got a ticket there before and it was only 400 baht. So I knew what was happening. So I walked over to the police officer and I said, sir, I said, he's a tourist. Maybe you could just have a good heart and kind of let him go, and the police officer said, no, it's normally 2,000 baht. He needs to give me 500.
If he pays right now, it's 500.
Yeah. And I said, oh, this isn't true. I said, I've gotten a ticket here, and I went to the police office and I paid 400 baht. And I said, it's not 500 baht. So then, of course, the police officer starts getting angry, right? Because he knows that somebody knows what they're talking about. So he gets out his chain, he chains up the motorbike, because that's usually what they do. And then another person comes out of the restaurant, a Thai lady, and she starts talking and trying to figure things out. And the person was just willing to pay and move on. He wasn't interested in anything whatsoever. But eventually it got to a point where it was like, you know what? This is this guy's issue. He chose to park there. And I was like, you know what? Be well, have a good day. And I walked away. But I tried to help, right? Yeah. But I didn't have to.
But I wasn't required to. Thanks a lot, David.
What's that?
And that guy's thinking, thanks a lot.
That's what he said when I left. He said, thank you so much.
He's going to get his motorcycle chained up,
Yeah.
But no, see, now that's an example. I could go either way with that. I have no problem with what you did. Yeah. But I mean, if someone was going to actually harm themselves or another person, something a little bit more extreme, what is the responsibility at that point?
There's no responsibility at all. You don't have an obligation to step in, but you may, because of your loving kindness and compassion, you might choose to. But each situation is different. There's not just one standard answer. So say, for example, I was walking down the street, a woman was being attacked by 5 guys, and they have knives and guns, and they're going to rape this lady. I can't do anything with those 5 guys in knives and guns. The best choice that I can do is go get a police officer or go get a bunch of other people, and now we'll come potentially help this young lady. But if it's one person and they don't have any weapons, hey, maybe I can go over there and do something, right? So you can't come up with a permanent answer that says, if a woman is being attacked by a male, do this. You can't say that, because in each situation, the variables are different. And this is where you need to have a higher consciousness in your mind, where you look at each situation as a unique situation and decide, what should I do here? What is the wisest decision? So with that example with the motorbike, initially, my thought was I saw the police officer looking and I was like, oh, let me help the police officer. He won't have to get off his motorbike. I can just let this guy know and he can get on his motorbike and leave. This was the mistake that the guy did. He went out there and started talking to the police officer. If it was me, I would have just went out there, got on my motorbike and drove away. As soon as you start talking to the police officer, that's where you're opening yourself up to a potential fine, right? So when he started engaging with the police officer, that's where things went in opposite direction. But anyway, there's not just one set way to handle any one particular issue, but it's your wisdom and your higher consciousness that you need to look at each situation. But don't feel like you have an obligation or a requirement to help somebody. It always needs to come from within your own situation. You might not be in a situation to be able to help. So let's give that same scenario, like a single person is attacking a woman and potentially raping her. He has no weapons or no nothing. Where in some cases, I might go over there and try to help that woman. Maybe I feel strong. Maybe I've eaten some good food. I feel pretty vibrant. Maybe in another situation, I'm pretty depleted. I haven't eaten. Maybe I haven't really drank. Maybe I've been teaching a lot. And maybe I don't have the energy to go over there and do something that maybe I'm putting myself at risk and putting her further at risk. Maybe the better choice would be to go get some other people to help out in this situation. So the variables are always going to be so different because of impermanence that you need to have a higher consciousness to logically think through the situation and decides what's going to be best in each situation, looking at each situation uniquely. So the Buddha doesn't give a decision tree of if this happens, do this. If that happens, do this, because that would be a permanent answer for every single issue. And there's not very many situations that are going to be that way in your life because the variables are always different.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're oftentimes taught that we're obligated to do something, right? And this is where you could get yourself into difficulties. If you just rush in to 5 guys with guns and knives, you could really be putting yourself in a unfortunate situation. Yeah. I think there's more that you're thinking about. So,
well, it wasn't so much that. It was more of, it seems like a lot of times you're saying, especially when dealing with people who are perhaps difficult in your life, it seems like you're saying don't offer unsolicited advice. Of course, if someone comes to you and says, hey, I'm having trouble or I'm angry with you, then you can offer, what you've learned to help them out as well, especially if they're family members. But so I think you're saying you can offer unsolicited advice depending on the situation.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm always going to be sure the person I'm talking to, that their mind is open to the advice that I have to share, because I'm not interested in spending my time with someone who doesn't have an open mind. Because remember, in the unenlightened state, there's ego, right? There's ego, there's the arrogance. The person thinks that they're so smart, they're so right. If you rush in with unsolicited advice, you're bucking up against an ego and it's not going to work. So one of the best things you can do is preface what you're going to potentially share with, are you interested in my thoughts on that? Or are you open to some advice on that? Or would you like to know my perspective on that? And sometimes they're going to say yes, and sometimes they're going to say no. And when they say no, okay, no conversation. I don't need to go further. I'm not going to spend my time and effort and energy. If they say, yes, I am interested, I'm going to start sharing. But sometimes they say yes, but their mind isn't really open to what it is you have to share. So if I'm 1 or 2 sentences into it and their mind really truly isn't open, but they said yes, they are open, I'm going to say, I'm not so sure this is going to be helpful for you. Maybe you're not interested in hearing what I have to share. And sometimes they say, yeah, on second thought, yeah, I'm not interested. Okay, done, over with, right? I'm going to walk away. But if you have a craving to share, you'll have a hard time walking away in that situation, right? So you got to get to the point where you don't have a craving to tell everybody else what you know, because right now in the unenlightened state, you don't have full wisdom to understand. And your job isn't to go around to people's life and step into their life and tell them what they should and shouldn't do. that would be your own ego that's choosing to do that. So that's why I said you need to know your role in somebody's life. If there's somebody that I don't know that's doing something unwise, I don't need to share anything with that person. Like, for example, one time I was in a restaurant and I was eating, and this tourist walked into the bathroom, used the restroom, and walked out. I wouldn't do that here in Thailand. In America, we do that regularly. You know, it's kind of like a frequent thing that we will do in some places. But here in Thailand, I know that business has to pay for the water, they have to pay for the toilet paper, they have to pay for all these things, and they don't make a whole lot of money. So I'm either going to buy something or I'm going to offer the store some money. And oftentimes they say, oh, no, you're fine. You know, just go ahead. But this person just walked in, used it, and walked out. I didn't say anything to her. I know it's unwise, but it's not my place to step in and say something, right? So if you went around looking at everything everybody was doing was unwise and you were stepping into their life and trying to tell them what to do, you'd be a really busy guy. And you'd probably be very frustrated too, because people aren't going to be interested in listening to you. Yeah.
So in relationships that had a lot of attachment in past, and there are like pleasant feelings attached to love, and there is like a lot of attachment, and now there was not much of true love there, maybe because of all the expectations and everything. And when it comes around, because there was not a right view there established, but now as we understand right view, but it's still hard to practice right view in the situations where earlier there was not much of right view there, and it's much more challenging because there was a lot of attachment there. And so my question is like how to deal with attachment like this, how to eradicate this attachment, because it's really difficult in certain cases.
Yeah, one of the classes that I'm going to teach as part of this course is how to eliminate attachment to those people who are closest to you, because those are the relationships where you'll struggle the most, like mom, dad, brothers, sisters, life partners, children. These are the people that are closest to you, and your mind has the most opportunity to get attached to them. So there's about an hour and a half class that I'm going to teach. I think it's tomorrow, where I'm going to teach you how to eliminate attachment to the people who are closest to you. So that would be a better time to answer that kind of question, because there's multiple things that you're going to need to do in order to eliminate your attachment to people. It's very common for the mind to get attached to people, and that's what people are thinking is love, but it's not. So if you can wait until then, would it be okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well,
and also like because of this perceptions or beliefs and the past habits that we have, it's really difficult. Maybe I can wait till tomorrow, but yeah, this is a little bit that I wanted to share in this.
Yeah, maybe when we get to that class, you can even share more detail, like specifically, and then that way I can provide you more guidance after you've learned that, and then I can hear the details from your situation, and then I can give you better advice then.
Okay, and I have a few other questions, like will an enlightened being, after being enlightened, will they choose to be in a relationship or will they not?
By the time someone's gotten to enlightenment, they have already decided whether or not they're going to be in a relationship or not, like a life partner, right? Yeah. So it's not like somebody wouldn't get enlightened and then decide, okay, now I'm going to have a relationship. By the time they would have gotten to enlightenment, they would have already sorted out whether they're going to be single or they're in a relationship, and they will already be in that relationship if they're in a relationship. So the idea of like meeting an enlightened being and then having a relationship with them, it's not going to happen that way. So oftentimes a couple will get together. Of course, they're not enlightened when they first get together, but then as they do that inner work, they become more and more enlightened together. And now they're in a relationship together, but they're both enlightened. Or someone will have decided to be single and then they'll make their way to enlightenment that way. But once a person becomes enlightened, they're not going to go from being single to being in a relationship now. It just wouldn't happen. In terms of a life partnership.
Yeah. What if a person has like this want to help everyone, and because of that they want to get enlightened, and so they get enlightened and they could help others? Will that be wise or not wise to think of it in this way?
If they want to get enlightened, they won't get to enlightenment, because that's the craving, the desire. So you need to have a goal, an objective, an interest, an aspiration that you would gradually like to make your way to enlightenment. And then having gotten to enlightenment, you'd be able to help a lot of people. Whether you're a teacher or whether you're just a member of a community, being an enlightened being, you'll have deep, deep wisdom to be able to help others with their journey to enlightenment. But how you choose to do that, whether you kind of formally teach classes like the way I do, or whether you just be a business owner or a stay-at-home mom or dad or something like this, each individual will decide that for themselves. But having gotten enough wisdom to get to enlightenment themselves, they would then be in the best position to be able to help others. But by that point, they would only be helping people who are asking for their help. They wouldn't just be going out and kind of inserting themselves into other people's life in order to give them help. But instead, they would only be giving help like we were talking about, in an unsolicited way, which, as I'm sharing these kinds of things, right, this is very different than how your mind probably thinks right now. Like, Rex, like when we were talking, like, I know, like from the culture that we grew up in, we're kind of taught like, no, we should like step in and tell that person we don't know that they're doing something unwise and they need to fix what they're doing. This is kind of like what we're taught growing up. So learning how an enlightened being functions without craving, desire, attachment, without ego, is going to be very different than the way that you currently function. But the way that you currently function is one of the reasons why you experience discontentedness and you experience struggles in your relationships, because the mind hasn't awoken to this wisdom of understanding that giving unsolicited guidance is very unwise. Stepping into someone's life like that, it's very unwise. So somebody learning this in a class like this might be like, whoa, that's completely opposite of what I would do. And the answer is yeah. And that's why, because right now the mind's in the unenlightened state, and you can't quite see why it would be wise to not talk to that person you don't know and give them unsolicited guidance, that the mind can't see that readily. So in this kind of situation, if a person gets to enlightenment and they choose to teach, they would choose to teach, and that's what they would choose to do, but they would do that they wouldn't do it in an unsolicited way, right? But if somebody just chose to be a member of a community and they were a business owner and they were enlightened and they had wisdom to help the people around them, they would still do the same thing. They wouldn't have ego, they wouldn't have craving, they would only help people who were asking for their help. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, you're so wise and you see so many unwise things that are happening around you. If you went around and tried to correct every single one of those things, oh my goodness, you would be busy like constantly, right? Like constantly busy, because there's just so many unwise things that are happening in the world. You wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment by going around and constantly giving people unsolicited guidance. An enlightened being wouldn't do that. But by the time you get to enlightenment, there's so much wisdom in your mind, you're just going to see so many unwise things in the world. And that's where you need to learn how to step back, and those people are making their own decisions. And your role isn't to step in and tell them what they should or shouldn't do. It's just a waste of your time.
Doesn't it feel, for an enlightened being to see so many unwise things, doesn't it feel bad?
It doesn't feel bad. That's what this topic is, right? Because practicing in a world of non-practitioners, the more that you practice and the more wise you become, you're going to see countless unwise things in the world happening. But the more that you see those, if you feel pain, if you feel bad, that's because of your own craving, wanting things to be done in a certain way. So the more unwise things you see in the world, the deeper you're going to have to practice, because you're going to walk around feeling bad. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you already understand, like, all these people that are making unwise decisions, that's their decisions. It's not affecting you. But if you have craving for them to function a certain way, it will affect you. But by the time you get liberated to enlightenment, what other people do doesn't affect you. So when I watch the news, if I see somebody got murdered or raped, it's unfortunate that that's occurred, but I don't feel bad about it because I'm not the one who did it. I'm not the one, I can't fix that. That person chose to murder, that person chose to rape. If I see a child suffering or a child got kidnapped, taken away from their parents, it's unfortunate that that's occurred, but I don't feel bad about it because I don't have a craving for the world to be a certain way. The world's going to function the way it's going to function, and it's unfortunate that this has occurred, but I don't have any ability to change that. All I can do in my role as a teacher is to share these teachings. And the more and more people that learn them, the world will become a more peaceful place. But I can't force somebody to learn with me. So when that murderer chooses to murder, or that rapist chooses to rape, or that person chooses to steal that child from their parents, it's very unfortunate. But I know that that's coming from craving, anger, and ignorance. It's coming from that person's mind, and I can't do anything to fix that mind. That person has to decide for themselves to fix their mind. So an enlightened being isn't going to feel bad when they see unfortunate things happening in the world. They're going to understand why these things are happening, and that's why they don't feel bad, because they don't have a craving for the world to be a certain way. They understand how the world is. In the world, the way the world is there's all these unenlightened beings with craving, anger, and ignorance making all these unwise decisions, and this is why there's so much calamity in the world. But for that enlightened being, their life is peaceful. Their life is joyful. They have nothing but peace and joy in their mind in all their relationships. But other people's life, they're really struggling.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, we can take another question.
I have a question about.
I think that's the one Rex had earlier.
Okay, so some of this is resonant with me, and I just want to make sure. Oh, sorry, there's something on. Somebody's raising their hand
It's
online. Do you want
Junko.
to take that?
It's up to you. You got the mic. Go ahead.
It's fine if Junko, because she's online.
No, go ahead. You started.
Okay. So my question is a couple things. So I like what you were saying about knowing your role. And I think that's very important. And it's hard to often remember that. I come from a teaching background and directing in theater. So often my role is to not tell people what to do, but to facilitate an experience wherein they can come to their own understanding. And that takes a lot of patience and taking ego out of it, and my own desire to solve their problem, even for my own intellectual understanding of problems in general, needs to take a back seat. And having grown up in the United States with a sort of global police, white savior sort of culture of, oh, I can fix everything, this sort of idea is I'm mindful of having to combat that sort of exceptionalist idea, having grown up in that context and being exposed to that, having to dismantle that actively as a process. So I understand that. And then I look at, and concomitant with that is the idea of like self-love, self-compassion. And how do we develop a higher conscious enough to know when self-compassion and self-love is tipping into indulgence, inertia, inactivity, excuses? Oh, well, I'm not, when does it go too far to create inertia instead of forward movement? Like not craving ambition, success in a material way, but how do I have a higher conscious about knowing when self-compassion has led to self-indulgence? Does that make sense?
Yeah. This is where your mindfulness comes in, your awareness of mind. You need to be cultivating that through your meditation, where you're aware of your own mind. And part of getting to enlightenment is you need to be very objective with looking inward and being introspective, an inward looking eye. You need to be very objective about that and looking at your own mind and be able to see that. And where you're confused and you're not quite sure, you reach out to your teacher and you say, hey, here's some thoughts that I've been having. I'm just curious, is this being indulgent? Is this being conceited? Is this arrogant? What is this? And then you get somebody's perspective, and then we help you to be able to see it for yourself. So it's your mindfulness or awareness of mind that'll clue you into those kinds of things. And you need to develop that wisdom to be able to see the difference between this is true love for myself and this is indulgence or arrogance or conceit based love, and I'm not interested in that, and I need to cultivate this more. Okay, so Junko, you had your hand up. Maybe you had the same exact question as Liz. I don't see your hand up anymore. Okay. Let's see here. We have a bunch of thank yous and whys on YouTube. You guys are all welcome. Pleased to share the teachings with you. Let's see, what else do we have here? And that's it. Okay. So I don't see any other questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to break for lunch. It's basically 12:30, and we're going to come back. We're going to do meditation after lunch, and then I'm going to have this next topic to share with you guys after lunch, which is sharing the path to enlightenment, how to guide children along the path. So if you have children, or you're thinking about having children, or you have nieces or nephews, but I'm also going to be talking about skillful ways to help other people too, like the things that I did in situations like with my wife and things like this. So it's not just for children, but if you have children, or you're thinking about having children, or you have nieces and nephews, this will surely be helpful. But also even in situations where there's other people in your life that you might have a life partner where you would like to maybe guide them a little bit in a skillful way. That's what I'm going to teach you as part of this. So if you guys would like to take, can we maybe take an hour and 15-minute lunch today? Maybe come back at, what time would that be? 1:45? You guys okay with that? Okay. So I'll see you guys at 1:45, which would be an hour and 15 minutes from now. And you guys online are invited. So we'll see you guys in a little bit. Okay? Take care. Mm-hmm.